Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Lunchtime Discovery Series. Glad you could be here on this Wednesday afternoon with us. It's time to start the show. My name is Chris Smith. I'm your host every Wednesday at noon for the Lunchtime Discovery Lecture Series, where we meet interesting people doing interesting things in the world of science, technology, engineering, mathematics, education, art, and more. It's good to be with everybody again for another edition. Glad that you could join us. Listen, we've got a really fun show for you today. I think you're going to enjoy it. Well, the dog people might like it. The cat and bird people, reptile people, I don't know. Maybe you'll get into it a little bit. But definitely for the dog people, I think you're going to appreciate this program. Actually, for anybody, I think this is going to be a good show because today's guest is going to give us a little bit of insight, maybe into animals like our dogs, but I think it's going to have to do a little bit more with us too. What do we know about ourselves by studying canines? I'll remind everybody tuning into today's program that you can participate. The Lunchtime Discovery Series is interactive. Make sure that you jump into the chat if you're watching on YouTube and leave your thoughts, comments, and questions as we go throughout the program. At the end of today's presentation, I'll be looking there to find your questions in order to pose to today's guest. So make sure as we go through the program, you're dropping questions as you have them. That way they're queued up and ready for me when we move into the audience Q&A section of today's program. Make sure you're doing that. And also make sure that you sign up for the Lunchtime Discovery Series newsletter. That way you know what programs are coming up in the future, and you can come back here and join us every Wednesday at noon for the program. That's a fun and good, interesting thing that you should do. At least I think so. Okay, let me bring on today's guest, and let's get into the program because I'm excited about it. Today's guest is Hannah Salomons. Hannah is a PhD candidate at Duke University's Evolutionary Anthropology Department, studying in the Canine Cognition Lab, which, by the way, is run by friend of the museum, Brian Hare. And I'm excited to have Hannah on the show today. Hannah, welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'm really excited to be here chatting with everybody at the museum.
So I'm excited about your talk, one, because I'm a dog person, and I understand that pretty much your life is working with cute and adorable puppies all day.
It is. I'm pretty lucky. I have puppies right across the hall, so if you hear barking while I'm talking, don't mind them. That's just our puppy kindergarten happening right now.
How many graduate students get to work with a puppy kindergarten?
Well, there's 4 of us in our lab right now, so at least 4, but I think a few other universities have similar programs.
A lucky few then, a lucky few. Well, I'm excited. I think our crowd is excited to learn more. Let's jump right into it.
Awesome. Let me share my screen.
While you're doing that, I need to remind everybody that the Lunchtime Discovery Series is brought to you by the Office of Environmental Education within the Department of Environmental Quality and a broadcast service of the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. Almost forgot to plug the very important people. Hannah, now it's all yours.
Great. So you can see my slides?
Yes, looks excellent.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for all tuning in. I'm really excited to share with you some of the recent work that I've been working on with Dr. Hare, my advisor, and the other graduate students and colleagues here at Duke. We are talking about the idea today of survival of the friendliest. So we'll be thinking about what dogs and wolves can teach us about human nature. Just to give you all a little bit of background about who I am. Like Chris said, my name is Hannah. I'm a graduate student here at Duke. In the past, I know there's a lot of educators in the audience. I was an educator myself down at Dolphin Research Center in the Florida Keys for about 6 years working on dolphin research. And I got really interested in the question of animal minds and what we can learn from animals about humans as well. So I came to Duke to pursue that interest in getting my PhD. So now I'm working here with the Canine Cognition Center. I get to play with puppies for my research, which is really just living the dream. I've gotten the opportunity to spend a few summers out in Minnesota working with wolf puppies as well. And then I also am still doing some work with the dolphins down at Dolphin Research Center in the Florida Keys. But today we'll be focusing in on the work that I've been doing with dog and wolf puppies recently. So we'll start with a little bit of background on the human story and why we're interested in dogs and wolves, and what does that have to do with humans. So cooperative communication is really important for humans because we have this really unique thing that pretty much only humans do called cumulative cultural evolution, which is something that kind of sets us apart from other animals. And this is when we're accumulating knowledge and technology over generations. So evolutionary developmental psychologist Dr. Michael Tomasello describes this idea like a ratchet effect. So if you think about like a ratchet tool, it only cranks forward, moving in one direction. So we humans, we accumulate knowledge increasingly, making more and more effective modifications to our technology without very frequently going backwards towards less effective ones. And so building upon other humans' knowledge from generation to generation is what has allowed us to go relatively quickly from super simple stone tools like these ones that you see here to now having supercomputers that we can carry around in our pockets. Over the course of human evolution as well, it's really allowed us to adapt to different environments much faster than just pure biological evolution would allow. So for example, there have been people who live in the Arctic for thousands of years, people who've been living in the desert for thousands of years. And it's not that our physiology has really adapted to living in those environments. It's that our culture has adapted, and we've been able to develop technologies to be able to survive in environments that our physiology may not be adapted to. There is evidence of social learning and even some limited forms of culture in other species. So you may have heard some things about like whales and dolphins, great apes having some forms of culture. But humans are really the only species in which this cumulative cultural evolution is happening in a widespread way. And we're the only species that's reliant on this kind of cultural evolution for our very survival. So my big question really is, what are the origins of this phenomenon of cultural evolution, and how did humans become a species that have the cognitive abilities necessary for cumulative cultural evolution? And so let's start thinking about this by looking at how this ability to quickly learn culture and technology from other humans begins in an individual baby. So gesture comprehension might actually be the first step towards this. By 9 to 12 months of age, human infants understand that other people's gestures are intended to help them and give them information. And this is what's called the 9-month revolution, where social cognition really begins to take off and bloom in babies. So at that age, they're able to follow an adult's pointing gesture to search for desired objects. And this ability turns out to be spontaneous, so it kind of just arises naturally on its own without much explicit teaching, and it's very flexible. So what I mean by flexible is that babies can really quickly generalize to understand a new arbitrary gesture. There's not something totally specific about pointing. They can understand all different kinds of communicative gestures, again, without being explicitly taught what they mean. What else is interesting about pointing and gesture comprehension is that it doesn't just simply show up alongside other abilities in babies. There's been some longitudinal analysis that shows that this ability to understand a gesture develops before other important social developments. So being able to understand a gesture comes before being able to produce a gesture, comes before symbolic representation and other types, which in turn precedes language, which we know that language is one of the main drivers of cumulative cultural evolution, where we can pass on information really easily and quickly and effectively. And so all these social abilities are making this cumulative cultural evolution possible. More recently, there's been further research that suggests that not only does the ability to understand gestures precede these other social developments in babies, it may actually be the foundation which allows these other abilities to develop. An inability to understand human pointing gestures can be an early diagnostic for children on the autism spectrum, signaling that other social development may not occur in the typical way. An ability to read human gestures also has predicted faster development of vocabulary in human babies later on, and it correlates with lots of other social abilities. So overall, understanding a pointing gesture, really foundational to human development. So how did humans' early emerging ability to flexibly and spontaneously understand this kind of cooperative communication, understanding that somebody is intending to help you by their communication, evolve in humans? Well, the first logical place to look, thinking about how this may have evolved, would be in our closest relatives, the great apes. So one of the foundations of kind of comparative evolutionary psychology that I do is looking to other animals and seeing, do they have the same abilities as us? And if so, how are we related? Did we get these abilities from our common ancestors, or did these abilities develop separately? If we see that great apes have similar cooperative communicative abilities to humans, we could assume that we as human beings inherited that ability from our common ancestor that we share with the great apes. However, if we don't find those abilities in great apes, that would be good evidence that it's derived in the human lineage, which means that humans evolved it on our own as a species. We didn't inherit it from our common ancestor with great apes. And in fact, that is what we find. When we test great apes on understanding gesture comprehension, they are actually not very good at it. There is a study that compared human children, ages 2 to 4 years old, with chimpanzees and bonobos in that same age range, and they found that the children were significantly more skilled than the great apes in their cooperative communication abilities. The great apes required hundreds and hundreds of repetitions of trials to learn to understand a pointing gesture, whereas human babies do not require this kind of intensive training. And then the great apes also were not able to generalize this understanding to a novel gesture. Every time there's a change in the gesture, they have to relearn the whole thing with hundreds more trials. Whereas humans, if you, instead of pointing, nod in a certain direction or point with your elbow or something like that, human children pick that up on the very first trial. They don't need to be taught, oh, this is a new thing that also means that. So here we can see an example of one chimpanzee struggling to understand a pointing gesture. So you're going to see the experimenter hide a piece of food under a cup and then point to show the chimpanzee where it is, and we'll see how the chimpanzee interprets that.
The researcher points towards where the food is hidden. Half the time, the chimpanzee picks the wrong cup. It doesn't understand that the researcher is trying to help it.
Yeah, so unfortunately, great apes are not so great at this skill. So we can see that cooperative communicative skills are derived in the human lineage. We evolved them after we split from great apes, but are they unique in the animal kingdom? This was our next question. It seems like there was some kind of selection pressure on humans that we didn't share with our common ancestors that led to the emergence of these cooperative communicative abilities that we have. So as evolutionary psychologists, we want to find out what was that selection pressure, what was leading to this evolving in humans. So we can look to other animals, and if other animals have this same ability, then we can think, okay, what kind of selection pressures did we share in common that would have caused these other animals to evolve this ability and us to evolve this ability separately, but maybe for the same reasons, due to the same kind of selection pressures. And so that's where the dog story comes into the picture. Some researchers, including Dr. Hare, who had been studying this in great apes, kind of thought to themselves, hold on a second, I'm pretty sure my dog could do this. I play fetch with my dog all the time. I'm pointing to show them where the ball has gone. And I'm pretty sure that they understand my pointing gesture much better than these great apes are doing. And so when they formally tested it, they found that in fact, that was true. The dogs were able to understand human pointing gestures. They could search for food in the location that the human was pointing to in the exact same kind of setup as we just saw in the video with the great apes, and the dogs were super successful. It did not require hundreds of trials for them to learn how to do this. Most dogs are able to do it from the very first trial, and they were able to quickly generalize, just the same way that humans were. If you show them a different kind of gesture, using your elbow or your head or something like that, dogs can understand that really quickly. They don't require all new training to be able to pick that up. It's kind of natural and spontaneous for them. So after they tested adult dogs, these researchers went on to test young puppies, because we know that in humans, this is a pretty foundational skill. It develops really early on in our social development. So we wanted to test young puppies and see if that was the same for them. And lo and behold, they found that young puppies were performing at similar levels to the adult dogs. So it appears to be an early emerging skill in dogs, just like it is in humans. There were plenty of follow-up studies that ruled out lower level mechanisms, like relying on their sense of smell to find the food, or just being attracted to where a human's hand was, or something like that. And there was even a comparative analysis done between dog puppies and human children, and found that they made the same kinds of correlated errors while they were learning this. So it's indicating that there's kind of a similar developmental process that was going on, whereas chimpanzees did not match the same pattern of correlated errors. So to summarize, it seems like humans and dogs both understand these cooperative communicative gestures, while even our closest relatives, the great apes, do not. And so researchers started to consider what kind of selective pressures that both dogs and humans had in common. And that's what led to what's called the self-domestication hypothesis. The self-domestication hypothesis is the idea that a selection for a friendly temperament or reduced fear and aggression can alter a species' cooperative communication skills by causing shifts in their development. And there's quite a few lines of evidence. We don't have time to kind of get into all of it, but in short, there's been some really neat experiments with domesticated foxes, where some foxes were experimentally selected for a friendly temperament. And over about 40 generations, it was found that they actually developed this ability to understand gestures, whereas the wild foxes who had not been selected for a friendly temperament did not understand that gesture. There's also some evidence from bonobos, who are a relative to chimpanzees, but have been selected naturally for a more friendly, less competitive temperament, but they're also better at this kind of cooperative communication. And so the idea for humans is that perhaps humans domesticated ourselves. So we have over time selected ourselves for friendly temperament by choosing who to mate with over evolutionary time. And it became advantageous to be more cooperative, to be able to get more access to resources, access to technology that could help you survive. And by selecting ourselves for this more friendly temperament, we have led to the similar shifts that we see in development, where an ability to understand cooperation and communicative intent is developing earlier and earlier on in our development. So that's what we're really interested in testing here. And we think that dogs could be a really good model for this. If we can understand how domestication and that selection for a friendly temperament has affected dog cognition, we can see if we see similar changes in ourselves and better understand whether we really domesticated ourselves as an early human species. So in order to test the domestication hypothesis in dogs, we want to see whether dogs who we know have undergone selection for friendliness are different in these kinds of abilities than wolves, right? Because they share a common ancestor, but wolves were not selected for a friendly temperament, whereas dogs have been. So if we can look and compare these two species, we can maybe see what domestication has done. So the domestication hypothesis predicts that even young dog puppies around the age of weaning with limited human interaction will be more attracted to humans than wolves and will outperform wolves at understanding human social gestures, but that they would be the same in non-social tasks, right? Because this hypothesis is all about how this selection for friendliness affects our social cognition. The canon ancestry hypothesis is kind of the alternative hypothesis, which would say that dogs are just really good at this because they inherited an ability from wolves. Wolves are very social animals. They cooperate with each other. And dogs are just better at reading human gestures because they've spent a lot of time around humans and they just learn it over time. They see humans moving around and they start to pick it up and understand it. And so if that were true, we would expect that it's all about how much exposure to humans dogs and wolves have. And if wolves were raised with the same kind of human exposure as dog puppies, we would see the same kind of traits develop in wolves. So that's what we set out to test. So here's how we did it. We tested a group of dog puppies and a group of wolf puppies. And just get ready because lots of adorableness coming up. Our dog puppies were all working we were working with a group called Canine Companions, which is a nonprofit organization that breeds assistance dogs for people with disabilities. And so we were able to work with their puppies. They're all retriever puppies, Labrador retrievers, golden retrievers, and crosses between labs and goldens. The puppies we worked with were between 7 to 18 weeks old. And what's really important here is that the puppies were all reared with their moms and their litters and had very limited human exposure. Humans came and, of course, fed them and cleaned them and took care of them, but they were only with humans for about 2 hours per day or so, up until they went into their human raisers' homes when they were around 8 weeks old. And at that point, they had more typical pet dog human exposure, being with humans throughout the day. But canine companions make sure that the puppies sleep in their crates on their own at night. In contrast, we worked with a group of 37 wolf puppies who were at the Wildlife Science Center in Stacy, Minnesota, which is an amazing wolf rescue nonprofit education center. Really cool place, does a lot of great work for wolf conservation. And they raise puppies that they hand rear. And the wolves come from lots of different types of rescue situations. But the puppies that we were working with were all first or second generation puppies to be born in human care. So that's really important because they were very close to the wild generations of wolves. So we know that they haven't been domesticated in any way just by selection over time from living in human care. The wolf puppies we tested were 5 to 16 weeks old. And like I said, they were hand reared by humans. And this was very intensive human exposure. These wolf puppies were with people about 24 hours per day, which is a pretty wild job. I got to spend the summer out there helping hand rear a litter of wolf puppies, and a lot of my colleagues who are co-authors on this paper spent summers out there with them. And we would sleep out there on mattresses on the ground in the wolf enclosure. I'll show you guys some videos of kind of what it was like out there. But just important to know that these wolves were with people literally 24/7, getting all their food from people, playing, snuggling, everything like that. Much more than the dogs that we tested. So I'll show you just a couple of cute pictures or videos of the wolf pups. So here you can see the wolf pups in somebody's room, just kind of hanging out with people right next to them, playing, wrestling, doing wolf things. And what's really interesting to note, and we tested their temperaments as well in a more scientific way, but just some anecdotal experience that I observed is that the wolf puppies are really not very interested in humans. When you walked into the pen with the dog puppies, they were instantly just all over you, wanting to climb on you, lick your face. The wolf puppies kind of play with each other, and they don't care too much about people. So you can see there, that's kind of the setup where they have this big outdoor enclosure, and then there's a little house that they can kind of just go in and out of, and the house is where the people stay. People come out and play with them in the yard too, but they can just go in and out pretty much at their leisure and be with people all the time in the house. All right, I think this is the last wolf video. I just figure y'all are here for some wolf cuteness, so gotta deliver on that. Beautiful sunrise at the Wolf Center. These wolf puppies, they just love to spend lots of time exploring. Okay. Oh. Okay. And then one last picture, so you can see this is a very common scene in the hand raising of the wolf puppies. There were also always adult dogs around to help raise the wolf pups as well. So these are both German Shepherd dogs that are there, and they help raise the wolf puppies too. So they're always around dogs and humans. So you would think that if they were going to learn how to read gestures, they would learn it either from watching the dogs do it or from being around people all the time. And I'll share with you guys what the results were. But you can see that's just kind of the side of me sitting right there, and the wolf puppies will just kind of climb all over you like your furniture, but they don't really pay you too much mind. So we tested this group of wolf puppies and dog puppies on a battery of different tests because we wanted to find out how their temperaments compared and then how their cognition compared. So for the temperament test, we tested their social and their non-social temperament. So basically their reaction to humans, which was the social, and to objects, which was non-social, that were both familiar and unfamiliar to them. And then we did a bunch of different cognitive tests as well. So we tested their working memory, how long they could remember where they had seen something hidden. We tested, of course, this important aspect of the gesture comprehension, and we did a few different tests of that, and I'll show you guys some videos of those. We tested their ability to control their impulses, called inhibitory control, And then we tested how much eye contact they make with humans when they're faced with a difficult problem. So I'll show you guys some videos of some of the most important tests out of these that we're going to really spend time looking at. So the first one is the pointing task. So this is similar to what you saw in the video of food in one of two bowls. They don't know which one we put it in, and then we point to where the food is and see if they can find it. So let's first watch a dog puppy try this. So we show them we have food in our hand, and then we fake hide it in one bowl and really hide it in the other bowl. Look. And then we show the puppy where it is.
Look. Okay.
And most of the time, the puppies are very good at this, and they will find where the food is. Oh, come on. Okay, so now let's watch a wolf puppy try this.
Try what?
Sorry, the video quality is not great for our wolf puppy videos. And just very confidently goes to the wrong one. So the wolf puppies, you can tell, are just not really paying much mind to the humans at all, whereas the dog puppy was really watching what the person was doing, and then the wolf puppy just kind of makes their own independent choice. Okay, so the next one we did was a marker cue. So I talked about these kind of arbitrary novel gestures. This is a gesture that neither of the species had ever seen before, because we wanted to see what they would do if they would naturally understand the intention behind this communication, because both of them, having been around humans a little bit, the wolves were around humans a lot, maybe they had seen a point before in their life and had some opportunity to learn what it meant. So we wanted to try this brand new gesture that they had never seen before and see how they interpreted it. So what we would do is hold up a little block, get their attention, show them that we were placing the block next to where the food was, and see if they understood that as our attempt to help them and show them where the food was. So again, we'll watch a dog puppy and then a wolf puppy do this.
Look. Look. Okay. Trace. Yeah.
So you can see I placed my hand empty next to the other food bowl. That's just to control for making sure that it's not just about where they saw our hand go that they're choosing. We want to make sure that they're really understanding that the block is the communication there. Now let's watch a wolf puppy try it. I don't know why it keeps doing that. Okay. Here we go for the wolf pup.
Look. Okay.
Oh. Once again, the wolf puppy doesn't seem to really understand that the human is trying to communicate to them. And then the final task that I'll show you guys on video is the human eye contact task. So in this one, we take a piece of food and we're putting it in a clear container so that the dog or the puppy, the dog or the wolf can see it, but they can't get to it. And so it's an unsolvable problem. And so we want to see whether they're going to look to the person to help them solve the problem, or if they'll just try to solve it on their own. So we're measuring how much eye contact they're making. So here we go. We'll start with the dog. So he's got his timer to measure eye contact. And you can see this puppy, it's kind of hard to tell because the puppy has black fur and black eyes, but you can see he looked up at the experimenter's face there for a second. He's kind of trying to figure it out, see if he can scratch at it. But then he lays down and he just stares that person in the eyes. He's like, excuse me, human, help. And you guys have probably, if you have dogs, all experienced this before, where they'll kind of look at you and then look at where they know their food is, and do the back and forth, trying to show you that they need some help. Okay, now let's see how a wolf puppy deals with this problem.
Look. Okay.
He's kind of sniffing all around, but he's not really looking at Kyle, the experimenter's face there. He's just sniffing. And then he just really goes to town trying to get it out himself. Can't do it. Decides to go see what else is going on. Comes back, tries to check it out some more. And the funny thing is that we actually had to go through a lot of different containers to find a wolf-proof one, because a lot of the wolf puppies, we started with like the Rubbermaid clear plastic ones, and their jaws are so strong they could just like bite it and crack it and get to the treats. So we went to these glass ones. But yeah, the things you learn working with wolf puppies. Oh. Okay, and then I don't have videos for the temperament test, but here's a little picture to show you. So the unfamiliar object that we used was this toy bear. So the temperament test was, we just place a piece of food on the top of a bowl here, and we'd have the either object or the person. So if it was a person, they'd just be sitting right next to it right there. And we would just see if the puppy would approach and if they would eat the food next to that person or object, and whether they would touch the person or the object. Gabby. And then the inhibitory control task, again, we don't need to see a video, but I'll just explain it quick. We have this clear cylinder, and we place a piece of food inside of it, and then we'd start the puppy with a cover over the cylinder. So they learned they had to go around to the side of the cylinder to stick their head in and get the treat out. And then we would take the cover off, so now it's clear and they can see through it. And we wanted to see whether they could control their impulse to just go straight for it and bonk into the clear front, or if they would remember what they learned to go around to the side. And the puppy in the picture here is doing a great job of going around to the side. Usually once or twice, they'll bonk into it, and then they learn to go around. So let's see what some of the results of this study were. Overall, our results showed that the domestication hypothesis was supported. So we found that dog, but not wolf puppies, were attracted to humans and showed early emerging skills for reading human gestures, even though, as we saw, the wolf puppies received much more intense human socialization. So let's look a little more in detail at some of these results. These are the results of the temperament test. So this is the one where they would approach the familiar or unfamiliar human or object. And we saw that dogs were 30.5 times more likely to approach a stranger, an unfamiliar human, than the wolves were. They were also 5 times more likely to approach even a familiar person. And what's wild is that in this test for the wolves, the familiar person was one of the people who had raised them. So they were super comfortable with them, but even so, the dog was still 5 times more likely to approach a familiar person. And then they weren't too different on the objects. The dogs were still a little bit more likely to approach an unfamiliar object they had never seen before, but there was no significant difference between the dogs and the wolves in how likely they were to approach a familiar object. So what we're seeing here, what's really important, is that there seems to be a very big distinction between the social aspect of their temperament and the non-social aspect of their temperament, which really fits with our prediction that a selection for a friendly temperament towards people is a key factor in the evolution of these cooperative communicative skills. Now let's look at some of the results of the cognitive tests. So on the left-hand side of the graph, we have the 2 non-social cognitive tests. So we saw that their memory, and I didn't show you guys a picture of this one, but it was just a very simple memory test. We just hid the food in one of the 2 bowls. They could see where we hid it. We didn't go to the other bowl. Just saw if they remembered where they had just seen the food be put. And they were not different. The dogs and the wolves performed about the same on that. The inhibitory control, their impulse control, also no significant difference there between the dogs and the wolves. But then when it comes to these social tasks, we start to see a big difference. So the dog puppies outperform the wolf puppies on the arm pointing. So just your regular pointing task that you saw in the video, and the marker gesture with the block that you saw in the video. I will note the wolves were above chance statistically as a group on the arm pointing. They were not above chance on the marker, but the dog puppies were significantly higher than the wolves in both conditions. Then when we look at the human eye contact, also we see that the dog puppies made more eye contact than the wolf puppies did. There was a significant difference between there. And then a couple of things that aren't shown on this graph but are really important results is that if we look at the first trial, so not having any opportunity to learn within the testing session, the dogs were above chance at both gestures, the arm pointing and the not marker gesture on the very first trial, whereas the wolves were not above chance on the first trial. And if we look at their individual results, so these are the results of all the dogs and wolves averaged together. But if we look at the individuals, over half the dogs performed above chance as individuals, whereas not one single wolf performed above chance as an individual. Then we also decided to test the genetics of our wolf subjects because there have been some previous studies that found that adult wolves were possibly able to understand this pointing gesture. There had been a lot of training involved with those as well, but there's also the question that wolves at some of these other wolf centers may be mixed with dogs. And so if we were testing a group of wolves that had been genetically mixed with dogs, that wouldn't be a very good comparison if we're trying to compare dogs and wolves, because we want to make sure the wolves are really wolves. If they're part dog, kind of ruins our comparison. So we did a genetic test to make sure that the wolves that we were testing were pure wolf. And there's a whole nother field that goes into what a pure wolf would be. But I'll just say for now that these little blue triangles, this is our wolf population that we tested. And we can see that they're grouping genetically along with all the other wolves versus these are domestic dogs up here. So we can tell that there's not any introgression going on between the wolf population that we tested with dogs, which is really important because some other wolf populations that have been studied in the past, there's evidence that they may be mixed with dogs. So our conclusion here from the wolf-dog comparison study is that it supports the domestication hypothesis. And our thinking as this goes is that as humans became more sedentary, a population of wolves, the ancestors of dogs, started to become attracted to humans. And specifically, they were probably attracted to our waste, right? They wanted to eat kind of the leftover food, the stuff that we were throwing out on the edges of camp. And they started to approach a little closer, a little closer. And the wolves who were less fearful of humans and more willing to approach a human camp, they had an advantage because they could snack on all that trash that we were leaving around and get an easy meal. So before that this selection began, all human-wolf interactions were probably limited by the wolf's fear response. So wolves may have had this ability to understand communication. We know that wolves with each other are super cooperative, very communicative, but they hadn't had that ability to show that with humans because they were too afraid to approach humans. But once evolution selected for an attraction to humans, and that attraction replaced the fear that they had of humans, and they started to become more like what we now know as dogs, this inherited social ability that they have was applied towards humans in a new way. And that selection started to change their cognitive development to where they could start understanding cooperative communication at an earlier and earlier age, as we now see that they're able to do it as young as 8 weeks old as puppies. They can be understanding these pointing gestures, which is pretty amazing. So we definitely have a lot of questions for future research. One question is whether a second wave of selection occurred. So we know that this selection on a friendly temperament was happening, and this could have started to change their ability to express their cooperative communicative skills. But then once humans started to interact and work with dogs in their daily lives, perhaps there was a second wave of selection directly on these cooperative communicative skills. Because you imagine if you're trying to work with a dog as a hunting companion or something like that, you might want to choose the ones who are the best at responding to your gestures. When you tell them, hey, go catch that bird over there, they understand what you're talking about. So there could have been another selection directly on these skills. We're also really interested in extending these comparisons to other populations of wolves because we're not quite sure what population of wolves dogs actually evolved from. There's still a lot of debate in the literature about that. And actually, if you're interested, a really cool paper just came out yesterday that there was a group of ancient wolves in Japan that is now thought to be the most likely population that all dogs evolved from. So definitely check that out. It would be really neat to be able to test wolves that are maybe even closer to the common ancestor with dogs. So in summary, what does all of this mean for humans? As humans, we may have domesticated ourselves, right? So all that we talked about with, as we evolved, started to select each other for more friendly temperaments, started to choose mates who are more cooperative, more communicative. Our selection for friendliness could have led us to evolve the communicative abilities that we have and start to see those developing earlier and earlier on for infants. And so if this is true, we can look to dogs as a model that we can use to study the evolution of human cognition as it relates to domestication. So it would be really neat. We'll get a lot more out of studying dogs if we know that humans went through a similar kind of domestication process. So that's what I have for you guys today. Thank you all so much for listening. I would love to answer some questions. I've got another little video of wolf puppies learning how to howl that I can play at the end, but I'd love to take some questions first. Oh, and if you're interested in seeing more cute puppy pictures, definitely follow our Instagram. It's at Duke Dog Cognition on Instagram, and we post really cute puppy updates all the time there.
Science and puppies, everybody. How could you go wrong? Hannah, thank you so much.
Thank you for this opportunity to chat with you guys.
Great presentation. I mean, packed full of information. And I hope our viewers are going to have lots of questions. I'll remind everybody, go ahead and drop your thoughts and your questions into the chat for Hannah, and we'll turn to those in just a moment. But Hannah, I'm going to rewind a little bit. How did you actually come to study puppies? Like, do you think of yourself as like a cognitive evolutionary biologist? Like you want to know how the brain is working, or are you interested in canines? What brought you to this topic?
Yeah, I mean, what brought me to it personally was really just an overall interest in animal cognition. So I kind of came to it from the opposite side. I think a lot of people came to studying dogs from an interest in human cognition by the story that I just explained. But I personally kind of came to it more from being interested in how animal minds work and wanting to understand, what animals were thinking. So I kind of got into dolphin cognition when I was working down at Dolphin Research Center and decided to pursue my PhD to find out more about that. And I found out that a lot of the best work going on with animal cognition was actually from anthropologists. So that's how I got into it. But yeah, I was lucky enough to be able to come join the Hare Lab, and Dr. Hare already had the whole Canine Cognition Center set up and this partnership with the Wildlife Science Center in Minnesota. So I was fortunate enough to be able to just jump right in when I started here at Duke. Oh my gosh, we are experiencing a fire alarm right now.
Well,
I don't know if I need to go or not. I'm going to just stay here. It's probably just a drill. I'm literally at the window. If I had to, I could climb out the window, but I'm sure it's just a drill. So I'm just going to stay here. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear the alarm too. But do what you need to do. I'd hate for you to need to get out of the building.
I mean,
or for them to come looking for you. I've got questions for you, but
yeah, let's just do questions. As long as it's not like too obnoxious for you guys to hear the alarm. I'm sorry about this. Did not know this was going to happen.
You know what? Anything can happen at the Lunchtime Discovery Series.
Yeah.
Okay, first question. How does the play behavior differ between the dogs and the wolves?
Yeah, great question. So they're pretty similar in the way that they play with each other. They both love to like wrestle and kind of bite at each other and just get crazy, run around and explore. But they're definitely different in the way that they play with humans. When I was playing with the puppies, the dog puppies will look at you all the time. They'll make eye contact. You really feel like you're engaging in a game with them. If you're playing tug or something, they'll keep looking at you. If you drop the toy, they'll bring it back over to you to ask you to keep playing. Whereas the wolf puppies, they'll kind of use you. If you wiggle a toy around, they'll definitely get interested in the toy, but they really don't. And this is just my anecdotal experience. They don't seem to have much interest in playing with you as a person. They want that thing that you're waving around, but if you drop it, they won't really bring it back to you. And yeah, they don't really seem to engage too much with you as a person.
Interesting stuff. Okay, let's see here. Has a gene or set of genes been linked to dog socialization abilities?
Yes, that's a great question. There has been a good amount of genetic work that's just started up recently. And what they found is pretty cool. They've actually, one of our colleagues, Gita Ganada-Desikan, who's also a co-author on this paper I just presented, she's been doing a lot of work on the heritability of some of these skills that we see. And she found that the ability to understand the pointing gesture is over 40% heritable. So what that means is that over 40% of the variability that we see between individuals can be explained by genetics. And then she was able to run a genome-wide association study to see if there were any specific genes that were linked to this skill. And she did find genes that are active in the brain and in development that are linked to this skill. So as of now, it's just a correlation. So there's a lot more work to be done to see whether there's really a causative connection between those specific genes and this ability. But it definitely seems to have a genetic component to it.
Okay, interesting. Pam wants to know, what is the most dominant type of wolf?
Not sure what you mean by that, whether you mean like most prevalent in the US. The gray wolf is kind of the major wolf that you find in the United States, but maybe if you mean more dominant within like their social structure. There's been a lot of research on wolf social structure, and a lot of what we used to believe about wolves has actually been found to be outdated. And there's much more current research that shows that wolf social structure is a bit more flexible than we used to think. So a lot of what you hear about like the alpha male and things like that are actually now being found when we've looked at more wild populations of wolves, not to be as true as we once thought when we had just studied a few small populations in captivity. But it seems that in wolf packs generally, there will be sort of a dominant couple that's the primary breeding couple in that pack. And then the other wolves are more submissive to the primary breeding couple who are having the pups. But again, there's a lot of fluidity within the wolf social structure more than we thought.
Yeah, I had recently seen some of that information come to light more broadly, that this whole idea of alpha wolf or the way that wolf society is organized really is kind of it's not true. It's not real.
Yep, exactly. A lot of those studies have been done with just, a couple small captive populations. But now that we have much more ability to study big wild populations, with technology, camera traps, things like that, we're able to find out, a lot more information, which is super cool.
Now, I also saw a research study, I want to say it came out 2 or maybe 3 years ago. And they found that domestic dogs have additional muscles in their face for manipulating their eyes and eyebrows in ways that wolves can't. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah, they did find that. And the kind of theory behind it is that they evolved this as kind of co-evolution with humans that gave them more of an ability to communicate with us and kind of hijacked our human emotional response system to be able to see, the same kind of facial expressions that we're expecting to see to understand what dogs might be feeling emotionally. And there's kind of related papers that they've hijacked our hormonal response too. So when dogs make eye contact with people, people have the same kind of oxytocin response as mothers have when they're making eye contact with their infant babies. So definitely they've hijacked that response to inspire humans to want to care for them and provide for them, which is pretty cool.
I mean, I can vouch that it works.
Yep.
Definitely works. Puppy dog eyes is a real thing. Even on my senior dog.
Yeah, I was hoping to go grab a puppy from across the hall to bring in for the question section, but they're probably all out for the fire alarm now, so I don't think I can.
Right, yeah. Okay, let's see here. Another question for you. Do you have any interesting takeaways or implications from this human self-domestication hypothesis?
Yeah, great question. So one of the biggest implications from the human self-domestication hypothesis is that we've really evolved to be cooperative and friendly to people that we associate to be within our in-groups. And a lot of the research behind that is probably a lot for me to get into right now, but kind of the takeaway from it is that if we can find ways to cause people to think of the broader human society as part of their own social group, that's going to help a lot with, reducing aggression between groups that we find today. So looking at ways, turning to psychology to cause people to associate others who may not be part of their current social circle to be associated with their own group is a good way that we can help reduce, a lot of aggression that we see between groups, whether that's political groups or nations and things like that.
Not Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook is not helping. Definitely not.
All right. Let's see here. The next question that I see, is there any scientific research, not just by dog breeders, on enhancing dog cognition and socialization even more with selective breeding, gene sequencing, or gene therapy? They are fantastic companions, writes Bruce.
Yeah, definitely. There is a lot of research going on within the working dog community. So I'm not sure if that's what he means just by dog breeders, but not just by people who are breeding for breed standards, but for people who are breeding for traits that make good working dogs. There's a lot going on there. So there have been a few studies with canine companions, the partners we worked with here, that have shown that puppies who make more eye contact with people, puppies who are better at understanding these gestures, are actually more likely to succeed as service dogs. Because right now, there's only about 50% or so of the dogs who are trained as service dogs end up fully making it through training and passing the test to go on to become service dogs. So if we're able to select as young puppies for behaviors that might indicate that they're more likely to be successful, we can focus in like the training and the resources on those dogs earlier on. So there's a lot going on there. And then as far as like genetic selection goes, once we can learn more about specific genes that are linked to some of these traits, there's definitely more promise for that as well, being able to like do genetic screening and things like that to find out who might be the most successful companions and service dogs.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, Hannah, thank you very much.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say,
go ahead.
For like specific research on that, Dr. Lucia Lazarowski, she does a lot of research on selection and being able to predict like best service dogs and things like that. So definitely look to her research.
Excellent stuff.
Yeah.
Wait, did it?
I think it stopped.
All right.
No fire. I'm still here.
That's good. That's good. We got closure to the whole program now. We know that you're safe from the fire, and we learned all about your science.
Great.
Well, on that note, Hannah, thank you so much for being a part of today's program.
Thank you so much for having me. This has really been a pleasure.
Excellent stuff. Looking forward to see what comes out of the Canine Cognition Lab and your research in the future. And thanks for being on the program.
Thanks so much.
All right, everybody. That's our show for today. Thanks for tuning in to the Lunchtime Discovery series. We will, of course, be back here again next Wednesday at noon. Make sure that you're following the Office of Environmental Education on Twitter. They're at North Carolina EE. You can get updates about this program and more stuff coming out of the EE office by following them online, and visit their website, eenorthcarolina.org. There you can sign up for the email listserv to get updates about this lecture series and more programs and events. And of course, you can go to naturalsciences.org to see updates for this program, as well as a lot of other great science and nature programs coming out of the Museum of Natural Sciences every day. And the museum is on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as @naturalsciences. Somebody had brought it up in the chat too. The Instagram for the lab that Hannah is a member of is Duke Canine Cognition. Is that right?
No, it's Duke Dog Cognition at Duke Dog. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think that's it.
There you go. Okay, Duke Dog Cognition. Check it out, everybody. We'll see you again real soon. Bye, folks.